Cool. This is Live from the Table, recorded at the world famous Comedy Cellar, coming at you on Sirius XM 99, Raw Dog, and on the Laugh Button Podcast Network. Dan Naturman here with Noam Dworman, owner of the Comedy Cellar.
Present.
Perry Ashenbrand, our producer, quote unquote, because there is some controversy as to whether she really is a producer. She books the show. I'm not sure what else she does. So Noam had some issues with whether.
Well, I'll tell you what. One thing she does, she lost a file this week, but we'll talk about that later. Go ahead.
Anyway, she is not here. She is still
really upset about.
She is still in Israel. She will be back for the next show.
Periel, you downloaded it. How is it? If you downloaded it to send it to me at one point, it has to be. You must have downloaded it onto your computer.
You're talking to me or Periel?
She's like
in abstention.
And she, rather than saying you're right, I must have deleted it. She goes, yes, that's odd. As if there's a matter.
We'll hash that out when she's back in town. I don't want to get into that when she's not here. Carmen Lynch is here. Who's Carmen Lynch, you ask? If you're a comedy fan, you must know her. She's a Comedy Cellar regular. Her special, Vertically Challenged.
Vertically obese, but
vertically obese. I'm vertically challenged. She's vertically obese. She's what we call a tall drink of water. Her podcast, Human Centipede.
Nothing to do with the movie.
But centipede because you're long and thin? Is that why you chose the name?
Well, no, because it's about people being stuck together. My boyfriend and I were stuck together during the pandemic. So we started a podcast about life stuck together as a couple.
Our centipedes.
But I don't know the centipede. I don't understand
the Human
the play on words.
Centipede is a really bad movie. It's a really bad horror movie.
I didn't see that one. So. Okay. Carmen Lynch can be found at Carmen Comedian across all the social networking platforms. And I'm sorry, at CarmenLynch.com. Wait, what's your social media?
Google Carmen Lynch. Go ahead.
Or
CarmenLynch.com to find out where she's playing. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You're right. We give too much stock to these intros, but that's my thing. I drag them out because that's my thing. Karen Lichtman is here. Who's Karen Lichtman? Professor at Northern Illinois University, researcher in linguistics. Her main area of research is age and second language acquisition. And people that listen to this podcast regularly know that that's kind of an interest of mine, is language acquisition. I should point out, Karen, hello, first of all.
Hi.
Karen is coming at us from her office.
My ugly cinder block office at Northern Illinois University.
It does look very scholastic, but she's made time between office hour visits to come join us, and we're grateful to her for that.
Thanks for having me.
And just by way of explanation, Carmen Lynch is not just a comedian. She's a bilingual comedian. She's done comedy in Spanish and English because her mother is from Spain. And she grew up speaking Spanish as what we call an L1, I believe is what you call it in the linguistic field, meaning it's her native. She has two native languages, English and Spanish, but English is dominant. I have a second language as well, French, but I acquired that starting at the age of 31 and have been studying it for the past 20 years. And I've also done comedy in French. So that's the tie-in.
And I grew up with two parents who spoke a foreign language and can't speak it at all.
So you're an L3.
But that's very, very common. That's very, very common. But it's very, very common. People come to this country and they leave the maternal language behind.
What did your parents speak?
My parents both spoke Hebrew, but they only spoke it when they didn't want me to understand.
Yeah, well, that can be motivating.
Yeah.
So you talk about age and language acquisition. So a big question in the field is everybody assumes that kids are better at acquiring languages. We all acquired our native tongue with no effort at all. We just sort of started speaking it one day. And most of us who have studied foreign languages realize that it was a real pain in the ass. So it would seem to me that, yes, obviously kids are better at learning foreign languages. Is this true? Is it all that we think it is? Is there any nuance?
It's not really true. There is a grain of truth to that, which is if you want to get really good, you have to start young. So if you want to become absolutely native-like in every way, you should probably start studying before age 4.
Wow.
And
that's not really studying, but immersed in it.
Right. Yes. You should probably. So, Carmen would be native-like in both languages. She started that young. So if you start after age 4, you can get everything except for the accent. You're never going to get the accent. Just give it up. But if you start before like 8 or 12, you might be able to become native like with the grammar and vocabulary. So if you sort of think of like the tortoise and the hare, like kids can get to a higher level ultimately, but they're really slow and not that great, in week 1 of learning a language.
But what about the fact that kids do it with zero work put into it? And that when adults learn a language, it's studying, it's vocabulary lists, it's figuring out the grammar.
Yeah, I mean, that's mostly a function of just how much time they're spending and you're spending. So kids are spending, 16 hours a day learning language if they're immersed in that setting. But you're probably only spending like 1, right?
I spent 16 hours a day. No, I actually probably spend 2 hours a day in some sort of French related activity. But
okay.
But is it more? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Is it more about like children? They just don't seem like their brain has anything in it yet when they're young. Like we're so busy as we get older, our brains are full of worries and fears and it's like children, you always hear children are a sponge. Children, is it just because their brain is just so much more accessible because it's just still learning so much? Is it that?
It is. I mean, their brain is more plastic. I guess you could say it's more empty. You're saying they have more space to put the language in. I think if you're willing to forget your first language, you can do amazing things with your second language. So Dan, if you would just stop speaking English, your French would like really take off.
Well, that's a high price to pay that I don't think I'm willing
yes.
to do.
Yes.
So you're saying, by the way, you said that the reason kids can learn without effort is at least in part because they're immersed 16 hours a day and adults typically are not. Are you saying that could we duplicate that with an adult? And I actually had a joke about this years ago about learning language in prison and how if you went to prison in Spain, rather in Mexico, because I said Mexico is funnier than Spain. A Mexican, right? I mean, the word Mexican is funnier than Spain.
Yeah.
Anyway, would you agree with that?
Turkish is funnier than
Dr. Lichtman. Are you a doctor?
Yeah. Yes, I am a doctor.
Would you agree that Mexican as a joke is funnier than Spain?
Careful.
I do, but I think going to prison in Spain kind of sounds fun, like that there might be some wine and tapas.
But that's also why a Mexican prison sounds funny, because you just imagine it's worse. But I had a joke about learning language in prison because it would seem to me that the only time an adult could truly be immersed in a language would be if they were in another country in prison.
Well, immigrants.
But immigrants are with their families and with their community. You're
sometimes.
But if
you'd be immersed, you just wouldn't get the accent down.
But is there any academic literature on language learning in prison? And there should be if there isn't.
Actually, yeah, that's a great idea. But you'd have to convince someone to send you to Mexico. So,
but you could just study people that are in prison abroad.
Why don't you do something horrible and
check yourself into prison? Like just knock on the prison door in Mexico and be like, "Hi, can I be a prisoner?"
I mean, Jane Goodall dedicated her life to living with the chimp stand for science. You should just go to Mexico.
Well, I thought we could just ask Dr. Lichtman, but apparently I have to do everything myself as usual.
Yes, I do think that you could.
But do you think an adult similarly immersed?
Yeah.
Would pick up a language as well as, or almost as well as, or as effortlessly as a baby?
So adults can still learn language effortlessly. We just don't. So a lot of it is the classes. Like the classes tell you to study all this grammar and study all this vocabulary that's really above your head. Like it's too hard for you. That's why it's work. That's why it's studying. But if you could just get a language class where people just talk to you, and they made it really comprehensible. Like if you think about how you talk to a toddler, I have a 2-year-old, she's almost 3. And like when I talk to her, a lot of times we're talking about like what's right there. Like we're talking about the toys that are right there. We repeat everything a lot. We talk about exactly what she's interested in. And so, yeah, if you could get a class that's a little bit more like a parent talking to a child, then you could learn more effortlessly as an adult.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
So first of all, I know adults who are immersed who just will not learn. I don't know why, but I was terrible Spanish student in high school. I just had no interest. But I found that whenever I would meet a girl that I was interested in, who was from a foreign country, boy, I mean, most of the foreign vocabulary I have in various languages was to try to flirt with various girls. So just to say that.
I actually have a phrase book for that right over on my bookshelf, interestingly enough.
You have what?
A phrase
book. A
picking
phrase book.
girls.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm married now, but
But for Dan, go ahead.
but just getting to the science of it. First of all, in no particular order, my middle son Manny is he started speaking at 9 months old, and I'm not exaggerating it. And by 22 months, he could identify all the instruments in the symphony orchestra, all of which is to say he clearly had some sort of aptitude for language that had nothing to do with the way he was raised. And it's carried over. He's in 3rd grade now, and he'd be like, Dad, I would not relinquish control. Like he just spits out big, huge adult words without even trying. So my
daughter's kind of like that too. She can like sing entire songs from Woody the Pooh that she has no idea what they mean.
Yeah. So clearly there's something going on there with this kind of fertile brain.
Okay, but I mean, your son was very early with language, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a magical thing that all kids have. It's like your son was particularly good at that task,
and it continues through to him.
Well, so what's your Noam? Do you have a question?
Yeah. So, but like I said, no particular. So I'm just dividing the kind of the thing in my head at first glance. So accents to me are not really language in the sense that this is similar to me like musical styles. If you grow up in an Arabic country, you can play Arabic music and understand it. But if you try to acquire it after like 7 or 8 years old, Arabic people will always be able to tell, you're not actually Arabic. So I think that's kind of what accents are. And obviously, you can learn a language without ever speaking it. But then grammar, I notice in my kids very early on, they start making grammatical mistakes by taking the words that they're learning and forcing them into the grammar that kind of programmed into their brain.
Like over regularizing them. So like I singed instead of I sang.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed that. So that makes me think that grammar is actually something different than vocabulary, that you could have
yes.
So maybe you talk about it. You could have a talent for grammar and a talent for vocabulary, and they're not the same thing.
Yeah. So the other thing is that vocabulary is not age dependent. So you guys can learn new words every single day. It's easy, right? COVID, social distancing are not, we didn't know those words a couple of years ago.
Right.
And you can still learn new words when you're 99. Like it's totally easy. Grammar is a little bit more age sensitive. So it's hard to learn a grammar as you get older. If you already have one, it's working for you. Learning a different one is harder. So vocabulary, super easy to learn. Grammar, a little harder.
Is that good news for Carmen Lynch? Because your Spanish grammar is kind of baked in, but your vocabulary, you would suggest, is more infantile.
Well, I grew
up. That's probably not the right word.
No, but that is the right word. I lived in Spain until I was 8. So one of my jokes in Spanish is that I speak like an 8-year-old girl, and I speak what I knew back then. Now to learn the slang and like the words that are like cool and hip, like that, I have to learn those when I go to Spain and see family. Like I don't know those words.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to watch. Like my mom is from Spain and my dad's from New York, and my mother only spoke to us in Spanish and my dad only spoke to us in English. So I kind of grew up thinking, well, that's like, I had to, like, I didn't even know they were like tricking us. I just looked at my mom and spoke in Spanish because I thought it was just programmed in my head.
Did you know that it was a different language? You just thought, mommy, you speak to mommies like this?
No, I think I eventually I knew it was a different language, but it wouldn't even cross my mind to speak to my mother in English.
But hilarious if you just started speaking Spanish right now. Anyway, it'd been funny as a comedian. I eventually I found.
What about learning?
A really good strategy, one parent, one language, because that means that you get the consistent language input in both languages.
But it almost wasn't even a choice for them, because my mother's English was so bad and my dad's Spanish was so bad. They literally went out 4 times and got married. So they barely spoke to each other. They just, and then watching my sister marry a Spanish guy and them doing the same thing to their daughters was interesting because I was watching things that I used to do that my nieces do now. Like in Spanish, you can use double negatives. But then when I came to America, I was like, I don't want no broccoli. And my dad was like, don't talk like that. And I was like, but it's totally fine. I can say that in Spanish.
It's fine in prison too, by the way.
But then what I was going to say is watching my little niece, Nicole, we taught both of my nieces and the older one picked it up instantly. She was 5 years old and she's like, I want candy. And the little one wouldn't speak in English. It's almost like, are you ashamed? She would only speak Spanish. And then one day it just all came out. Like it was like there was a dam and it just broke open and she had all this English, but she wasn't speaking it for so long. It was really weird.
Their first language was Spanish?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's really common for whoever's the oldest sibling to speak the language best. And then the younger siblings all fall off from there because they just have more of the majority language in their lives. What was I going to say? Okay.
That makes sense because my sister speaks Spanish better than I do. She's older. So
yeah. But I mean, I'm sure yours, if you left at age 8, you should be pretty solid.
I feel I can understand everything. Now, Catalan is a different language in the north of Spain. And that was a different experience because we didn't speak that at home, but my cousins, they spoke it to each other. So I mostly understand it, but when I speak, I sound.
The north of Spain, by the way, is where Brandy's locket was made. Remember, Brandy wore a braided chain from the finest silver from the north of Spain.
Oh, from the song.
From the song. Anyway.
Okay. I was like,
support,
do you speak a second language, Dr. Lichtman?
Do I? Yeah. Spanish is my best second language. And then I know a little bit of German, less of French. I'm currently doing Duolingo in Dutch, but as far as languages,
I don't do Duolingo. I have my own method, the Naturman method. But we'll discuss that another time. I have a question. How do you explain the fact, and I don't have kids, so I don't get to watch them learn languages up close, but it seems to me from my own memory and from my limited interaction with kids, limited ever since the trial. I'm kidding. Well, we're trying to get some comedy in here, because it is a comedy.
Well, we have a prison theme going on.
Yes, we do. It seems to me that kids, at least on a vocabulary level, Noam was talking about grammatical errors. Kids don't seem to make vocabulary mistakes the way adult learners do. I've never heard a kid say hot when they mean cold, but adult learners will make those kinds of mistakes. I've never heard a kid say, I wrote this down just so I get it, just so, I've never heard a kid say, or say cold when they mean told. In other words, just get one letter off. They never do that.
That's interesting, Dan.
I've never seen it.
That's true.
Well, I've never seen it, but
you've just never observed it.
I never observed it, and I don't. Yeah,
because
like I've never seen a kid say tomorrow when they mean yesterday, but in a foreign language, an adult learner could easily do that.
I think they do sometimes. So I know my niece says ask instead of tell all the time. And
I think your niece needs to see somebody about that.
Yeah, it's really adorable because she'll be like, oh, wait, I need to ask Phoebe something before I hang up. And then we're like, okay, what do you want to ask her? And she's like, I love you. Yeah. So yeah, I do think kids make mistakes. Another thing that kids do, little kids that adults don't do, is overgeneralize. So if they learn dog, they might call every single animal a dog, when they're only like 1. Because they're like, oh, I know this word dog, that'll work for everything. Which adults don't really do.
Well, because adults wouldn't do that, because when an adult learns the word dog, they learn it in conjunction with their native language word. They wouldn't just hear somebody call an animal a dog, and because that makes sense. You call an animal a dog, and it could mean it could mean all animals. It could,
yeah. On the other hand, my husband considers sheets to be blankets, so maybe adults do overgeneralize, but I don't know. I'm gonna have to disagree with your observation and say that kids do make mistakes.
I think there has to be a grain of truth to what I'm saying, though. I don't think they make the same kinds of mistakes as regularly.
Well, are kids as tired as adults? Like, have kids had as much coffee as adults? Do kids have as many song lyrics stuck in their heads as adults? Like maybe these are factors.
Well, these are things we need to study.
This is what I meant by empty brain space.
Yeah.
Have more space.
Also, did kids ever forget a word? Like, I don't remember, like, the kids ever like look at a tree and say, fuck, I remembered it. What the hell was that again? Maybe they don't use the F word, but
Yeah.
like,
They just might not verbalize that. They might just say nothing. And that's actually one of kids' advantages with language learning is that kids can just say nothing. Whereas you can't, you feel socially obligated to say something.
I'll tell you one mistake the kids do make. They have trouble with pronouns. They're like, give
Yeah.
it to she instead of like,
Yes.
give it to she.
That's true. My mother has a huge problem with pronouns in English. Even at her age, she's lived in America for 40 years. She's still like, give it to her and she'll be pointing at you. And I'm like, Mom, that's him.
what I want to know about you,
That's because you don't have to in Spanish. It's just
Yeah.
like, hey, for both
Yeah,
him and
yeah.
her. Yeah.
Carmen, are you doing anything to up your,
Wait. She did what you just said was interesting. That's because you don't have
Yeah.
to in Spanish, as if
Yeah, so
that
if
pattern
you-
controls her even 40 years later in English.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you say he speaks or she speaks, you don't have to say the he or the she in Spanish because the verbs are conjugated. So you can just say habla and that's it.
Oh, yeah. Because I was thinking more like él and ella. They still have that.
yeah,
They
but if you
do-
want to
they-
say she speaks and we don't know if it's a he or a she,
you have to
you would
say
use,
ella.
you would use the word just to clarify the ambiguity.
Yeah. But in French,
Yeah.
you have to say the pronoun, right?
In French, you say the pronoun, yes.
Yeah.
Because it's ambiguous.
That's like
Um,
English. Yeah.
That's interesting though, too, because like we just say the cat, the dog. But when you say L and la and all that, it's almost confusing the opposite way for us. Like,
yeah. It's what is gender marked on and what is it not marked
Yeah.
on?
Wait, I have one other question along Dan's lines. I know you want to say something else, but you know, some languages are said to be harder to learn and easier to learn,
Mhm.
but no language is hard for a child to learn.
Right.
And I suppose part of that reason, if there's some, I mean, I guess if you were to do a study of like just English speakers in their 30s and tried to teach them 10 different languages, I believe you would find that certain languages are harder than easier to learn.
Totally.
Is that just the grammar, which really is the delineation, or just, I guess now as I'm thinking about it, I guess
think-
in Chinese, the sounds, everything is different. The phonetics,
yeah,
are
the
different.
tones.
Yeah.
It's probably a measure of like how far apart the languages are. So English takes a ton of its vocabulary from French. So you have this huge advantage as an English speaker where you can be like politique, intéressante, and like, you know, you can just sort of put a French accent on things and chances are it might be a French word. So Chinese wouldn't have that,
Right.
you know. The
So
only
there's-
cognates would be
So
stuff
there's
like
no languages that are intrinsically more difficult. It's only more difficult because you come from a language that is nothing like
Yeah.
that is far
Yeah.
away from it.
Yeah, so most languages that we deal with a lot are Indo-European. So anything from English, like geographically over to India, is they're all related. So if you try to learn one of those languages, which includes French, includes German, includes Hindi, you know, you have a huge advantage. But our language has nothing to do with Chinese. It has nothing to do with Basque. So like you try to learn one of those, you're going to be hurting. I tried to learn Hungarian, just like a few phrases, like just to order coffee and stuff. Could not do it. Hungarian's not related. So it's really just sort of how far apart the two languages are.
What's a Pidgin language?
That is when people get thrown together in a prison, for instance, and they make up their own language just by, you know, throwing a few words of languages together. So they get like me, want, coffee. They just sort of make up their own communication system by blending together the different languages that they speak.
Is Yiddish a Pidgin?
No,
language?
that's a dialect.
or gibberish,
No,
or
it's a mix of German and Hebrew and
Oh.
English.
No, Pidgin is like literally kind of a prison type atmosphere, because what happens if those people stay in the prison for a few generations is the language sort of gets fixed by the kids and it becomes a creole. So you've heard of like Creole in Louisiana, you know, that used to be a Pidgin, but now it's a whole language, which
I
is a
see.
creole.
And it came out of prison.
No.
Well, she's talking about people thrown together, but she's
Yeah. So like slavery created a lot of Pidgin languages. So it's really,
So then Yiddish could be a Pidgin language at root.
it could have been back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what did they put together? Like Hebrew speakers with German speakers or something?
I don't know how, but it's an interesting language.
Are Pidgin languages still being created in the present? Is that still a thing, do you think?
That's a good question. Not that I know of. Maybe like in refugee camps or something.
I want to know if Carmen is, a question I was asking a few minutes ago.
From a Pidgin.
Is Carmen making an effort to up her vocabulary in Spanish? Because if you're doing comedy in Spanish, I would assume you want to.
Yes. And that brings me to another question, but I will, like when I do stand up in Spanish and when I do stand up in English, sometimes like it feels like I have two different personalities. Is that because I learned it from a very passionate Spanish woman versus a kind of deadpan American man? Like both languages were taught to me by different.
A lot of people have different personalities in two languages. I can't remember what the, research explanation for that is, but
That's fascinating.
I can only tell you that I'm less when I speak French to somebody because it still feels foreign to me. It doesn't feel as real. It doesn't feel as immediate. That there's a kind of a wall, and I'm less. The words have less of an immediate impact, and so there's actually less timidity.
Yes, it's a little more. I agree. It's a little more playful to do jokes in Spanish because it almost feels like, well, I got my base, I got my English stand up, I got my job. Let me play a little bit with this one, which obviously I still play in English, but it almost feels like you're a little more free to play.
Well, I think we're talking about two different phenomena. Okay. I'm just saying when I hear a word, when I say a word or hear a word in French, it doesn't have an immediate impact.
Yeah, like if you hear a woman was mangled by a tiger, like if you hear that in French, you might be like, oh, okay. But it might be more forceful to you in English.
Yeah, it would be more forceful to me because it just the meaning is more immediate, where it's not being, because there's still like it takes a second or a half a second or a tenth of a second for me to translate the word in my head. It's not, many of the words are not immediately.
Like curse words in French probably don't mean as much to you as English ones.
Exactly.
Yeah, they wouldn't have the same impact. But anyway, back to my question to you is, how are you improving your vocabulary?
I'm playing Wordle in Spanish. Does that count?
Yeah.
I don't read books in Spanish. It's almost like.
Do you read books in English?
I do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Need to know the null hypothesis.
But I do a lot of crossword puzzles in English because I've always had this complex of not being English enough because if you have to share your languages, if you have two, it always feels like you don't have enough of one of them. So I've always had this complex that I don't speak.
I think you got the English down. Now you need to you need to get that Spanish up to speed.
I'm trying. I'm doing more shows. What do you want from me, Dan?
I'm just saying, everything.
You got to get input. So you have to be taking in by either listening to or reading Spanish.
Well, what does help, and I know this isn't like enough, but like if I do jokes in Spanish, I sometimes will ask the audience for the word that they like best. And I will get 4 different responses because someone's from Mexico, someone's from Venezuela, someone's from Barcelona. So I do learn a little bit that way, but yeah, I should probably be. Oh, I do watch movies sometimes in their original language.
Now, Netflix, almost every movie on Netflix has a Spanish audio track, but very few of them have a French audio track, and it pisses me the F off.
Demographics.
Because the only movies with a French audio track are those Netflix made. All the Netflix made movies have an audio track in French. The movie with the N, with the red N on the upper left-hand corner, and they all stink mostly.
Yeah, but there's all kinds of French cinema.
I don't want to watch that garbage. The French movies stink. I like American.
Oh, is in your French?
Yeah, but I don't like that crap. So I like American Maverick, and
how are you improving your French?
I'll tell you how I'm doing it. I'm watching those god-awful movies on Netflix, sitting through them, enduring them. If I read a book, I'll always read it in French if it's available in French. And a lot of YouTube videos.
There's got to be a way to get these movies with French soundtracks. They're distributed all over the world. They must have French soundtracks.
Well, if I had a French Netflix account, which is probably not available in the United States, I probably could. So I have to watch whatever movies are available. So I'm stuck with, like, I saw a movie with Brooke Shields where she like married Carrie Elways and they inherited a castle, and it was a Christmas
I'd
movie.
recommend finding like a really long TV show. So Carmen, have you ever watched Grand Hotel?
No, but I've heard of it. I've heard about it.
Kind of
Yeah.
like people get murdered in like every episode. It's sort of like Downton Abbey but trashier.
Is it a
And then
Spanish
in
show, or
Spain-
you're watching it with a Spanish
Yeah.
audio?
No, it's Spanish. I mean,
It's
everything
from
in its
Spain.
original language, like Money Heist, La Casa de Papel, I think it's called.
Sí.
That was really good in Spanish. But I'll watch like soap operas in Spanish sometimes, just
Yeah, that's
for
good.
the practice.
The easiest-
Novelas.
The first thing I was able to understand was the news, because the news, they speak slow, the news, and they speak slowly, they speak crisply, and a lot of the vocabulary is more formal. And
There's a lot of proper names.
Mhm.
well, actually, sometimes I have trouble with those because I don't know if that's a word that I don't know or somebody's name.
Yeah.
But in the news, they're saying a lot of things. They're not using slang, and they're saying the word in a crisp way. So,
But Dan, do you ever get to the point where you're perceiving the language without realizing it's a second language?
yeah, but at moments here and there, but usually it feels like a second language to me. It's even after 20 years of study. Now, I don't know if this is because I've never lived in a French speaking environment, but even after 20 years of study, it still feels foreign to me.
Mhm.
And if they talk really, really fast, sometimes I don't get it.
Have you read Me Talk Pretty One Day?
No, that's what's his name? Sedaris.
Sedaris, yeah.
Yeah, it's about learning French, like in France. I think you'd like it.
Well, what does he have anything to say about the question that I just posed?
Oh, like if
If it's possible for me, even at middle age right now, to get to a native or near native level wherein it feel like I don't even realize that I'm speaking a foreign language. It's like
not really. I mean, what his book is mostly about how awkward he feels in France and how he'll just like buy stuff just to have the storekeepers be nice to him and talk to him in French. So he would definitely say, no, you will not ever be native like. And yeah, I don't think you can unless you either live in a country where it's spoken, have a partner that speaks that language, or forget your English.
well, I
which
don't want to leave
probably only
America, and I have
happens-
trouble
yeah.
with relationships, so it looks like I speak it quite competently, but
Mhm.
I haven't hit that stage where, as Noam suggested, is it ever like you don't even realize?
But are
and
there
I'm not at that
apps where you
level.
can talk to French people?
Well, there's also French people that you can talk to.
But I mean that are not here. You can't find if you can't find a French person in New
There
York.
is a website called conversationexchange.com. You find somebody that wants to learn English, and if you want to, and you like, I'll type in learning French. Okay, speak English, learning French, and it'll list, and then it'll filter, and I'll say women because I'm really trying to get laid, and then it never worked. But you know what? I'll tell you what, I didn't. But Dove actually had sex with one of the women I met on that.
Don't embarrass the professor.
I'm sorry.
Come on, I have more questions.
Professor, I'm sorry, but this is you were with a comedy side, but you got to
I
admit we're
just told
asking.
you I have a phrase book for picking up chicks in other languages. So
But you got to admit we're asking good questions for a bunch of comedians.
totally. Yeah. Oh no, I listened to one of your podcast episodes. It was on economics and you went into this huge tangent on language learning. I was like, wow, these people are really into language learning.
Well, I am, and Noam wants to have a better vocabulary in English, which is a very, very, I think. I mean, who gives a shit? But
Anyway, since I'm just like downloading and exporting everything I know about language that I've ever learned my whole life. Where is the science on this whole Chomsky thing about universal words? And
Universal grammar.
It's supposed to be mother in every language or something. I don't remember.
It's sort of like that language has different settings, that it's supposed to explain why kids can learn language so fast. So there's some people who say they don't, it takes them years, like that's a long time. But it is true that kids can do amazing things with language before they can, tie their shoes. So yeah, I mean, it does seem like kids do these amazing things with language. So I guess Chomsky's saying that like our brains are ready for language. So your brain knows that either the adjective's going to go before the noun or the adjective's going to go after the noun. Then all you have to do is listen to English and be like, okay, big cat, the adjective goes before the noun. So that's how my language is going to be. As far as where the science is on it, I mean,
is he the greatest linguist of all time? Considered to be the
he's the most famous.
most
I mean,
famous. He's terrible in Israel.
Linguistics.
But so I'm sorry, I interrupted you about the science. I interrupted you.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, some people see it that way. I think a lot of people now just consider it like pattern detection. Like Chomsky thinks language is like special and magical, and other people are like, no, the human brain is just really good at detecting patterns, and whatever input we get, you know, we'll notice patterns. So it's just our general intelligence that sort of helps us learn language. It's not special.
Is there such a thing? People talk about, they throw the term around, has an ear for language. Is there a special kind of intelligence? Some people obviously can learn language better than others, I assume. Is that just because they're smarter in general, or is there a particular kind of intelligence wherein one can learn a language more easily?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, it's a specific aptitude. Like you can be great at language and not at math, as many of my colleagues like to say all the time, that they're like, I don't understand math. So yeah, I mean, I do think you can be like better at language, but the really cool thing is that if you think of everybody in society, so even really dumb people basically speak English as well as you. Like anyone who can communicate in English, like regardless of how smart or dumb they are, they basically have the same mental system, and that's kind of cool.
Now, is there such a thing as teaching a child too many languages? If they had access to like 6, I don't know how, like just say school, neighborhood, parents, would that be like too confusing for a child? Or would you be like, no, just go for it?
I mean, I think what would happen is the child would probably latch on to 2 or 3. I don't really know of a lot of examples of people learning 4 or 5 or 6 languages all at the same time. There's
probably wouldn't get
of
enough exposure to each language either.
Hold on,
Right.
we have a good friend of ours. He hasn't been on the show in a long time. Tim Donor. You know who Tim Donor is? He's a polyglot. He speaks like 23 languages.
But he doesn't speak them all at anywhere near native level. He would admit that some languages he can have a basic conversation, some he can.
Yeah, but we called it. We ordered Chinese food on the podcast, and he spoke to the Chinese delivery guy.
Right, but he doesn't. But there's levels, and
there's always levels.
And so one could learn 20 languages, but can one learn 20 languages to native level fluency? Or
no,
3 or 4?
So.
What's the maximum, if there is a maximum?
I mean, there isn't a maximum. It's just sort of like diminishing returns. So I have heard, so I don't do a very good job of exposing my daughter to Spanish. There's just a lot of other things going on. We have jobs. She has some, different communication issues.
You're feeling guilty about it, aren't you? You have all the parents.
If you're looking to be reassured that you're not going to find it here.
Yeah. No,
we would encourage you to expose her more to Spanish.
No,
I'm letting that guilt go. I'm going to try to take her somewhere next summer because she's going to be like almost 4, and hopefully COVID will be mostly over.
Is your baby's daddy a Spanish speaker?
No, he took it for years and years and years, and we consider him novice high on the proficiency scale with lots of potential. So he's taken a lot of Spanish classes.
I think you got an uphill battle then if you want your child to be a Spanish.
Exactly. Anyway, where I was going with this is if I wanted to really be serious about getting her to speak Spanish, I would have to try to get a third of her day to be in Spanish. That's just sort of a rough ballpark estimate. So, if I was able to get her a Spanish speaking nanny instead of putting her in English speaking daycare, then I'd have a shot. My town doesn't have Spanish daycare though. They have all English daycare except one is Chinese. And even that one's like mostly in English with like some Chinese.
But yeah, we have a Spanish speaking nanny. I was hoping that would, but it turns out now the nanny's English has improved.
Oh, God. I was going to say that's very New York. I have friends who have Spanish speaking nannies.
We've had Brazilian au pairs. We have Brazilian, Filipino. Now we have
Now she's great at English.
And is there any particular reason why you've chosen Spanish as the language that you've pursued, and that's your best second language? You said so. Is there a
There
particular
is a
reason?
It's kind of a dumb reason because I made the decision at age 12, but there was a Spanish teacher and a French teacher, and the French teacher was just too happy for my taste. She just like every day she'd go to the class, she'd be like, bonjour. She was just super enthusiastic, and I was a little bit more morose, and I was like, I don't like that teacher. I'm going to take Spanish. And yeah, it turned out to be a great life decision just because.
Were you goth?
Not goth, just sort of nerdy. Like, books about like witchcraft and stuff. But I didn't like wear black.
Did you play Dungeons and Dragons?
I totally did.
She looks a bit like Camille Theobald, don't you think, Carmen? You know Camille, the comedian?
No, I don't know.
Oh, well, then you wouldn't be able to answer that question. But
my son Manny.
can we put up a picture of Camille Theobald, Nicole, and to see?
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about.
I can Google it.
I need to see the photo.
It's very risky to tell a woman or anybody, but I'm a sexist, but especially when that she looks like someone else and then say, I'm going to put the picture up. There's a butterflies in her stomach now, just hoping.
I can see it a little bit. Yeah. The hair is about the same length.
Well, are you looking at her on?
She Googled it.
I just Google image search.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, my son Manny is dying to play Dungeons and Dragons now. And I'm like, well,
thing?
so he's, what's that? Because of Stranger Things. And I'm like,
Yeah,
and he also listened to some podcasts. Yeah. And then I said, well, listen, I'm not going to play Dungeons and Dragons with you. I'm too busy. I said, why don't you get some of your friends in school to play with you? He goes, Dad, you want to embarrass me? I'm like, why'd you be embarrassed? Because Dungeons and Dragons is not cool. I can't tell my friends that I want to play Dungeons and Dragons. I'm like, millions of people play Dungeons and Dragons.
Especially now after Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of those people are not cool.
Yeah.
You know what I've noticed, by the way,
That's right.
Dr. Lichtman, to get back to our main topic. Here's something I've noticed, and maybe could be a subject for a paper. I don't know if you have tenure yet, but you're about to go. Oh, okay.
Now I can just sit around doing nothing.
When I dream in French, I have noticed the following phenomenon. Now, when a person dreams, there's different characters in your dream. You might dream that you're arguing with your mother. You might dream that you're on a date with a boy. So there's there's you in the dream, and then there's your mother or the boy or whomever.
A hot dog chasing a bagel through the Lincoln Tunnel.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have noticed the following. When I am dreaming in French, I speak French as I speak it in life, but the other characters speak to me in French, but it's actually just what's the word? Gibberish. In other words, in other words, it seems like different parts of my brain control different characters in the dream. The me in the dream is controlled by one part of my brain, more conscious, I guess. And the other characters are kind of unconscious, and they don't speak French. They speak gibberish.
Very interesting.
Has anybody noticed this phenomenon besides me?
Something to talk to your therapist about, but
what's that?
I said something to talk to your therapist about.
I'm offering you tenure on a silver platter. Of course, you already have it.
Oh, like do a paper about it? Well, okay.
I think it's fascinating. Two parts of my brain control my dreaming. This could apply to all dreams.
That is not what happens when I dream in Spanish. So when I've been in immersion situations, like when I studied abroad, or I did the Middlebury College, they do a summer program where you could go be immersed in French for like 6 weeks. So when I'm in those situations, I dream in Spanish. But the cool thing is, my parents in real life don't speak a word of Spanish. And in the dream, they just speak to me in Spanish, just like the whole.
And it's
dream.
comprehensible Spanish.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Carmen,
mine is completely different, and I don't have volume in my, like, people always ask me, do you dream in English and Spanish? And I'm like, I don't know. They're like visual. They're like images and pictures. Most of the time, things are happening, but not a lot is being said. So I actually was going to ask you, can you actually dream in 2 languages? Because it doesn't feel like you really can, unless I dreamt that way when I was young. And now I don't know.
So, but you dream in one language, or
I honestly don't. There's not a lot of talking. There's a lot of
action,
running and action. They're like scary, and they're not scary. They're active.
Are there subtitles?
I don't know. You guys are going to have to find like a dream professor to have on.
Well, I don't know if anybody has any more linguistic questions, because if not, we can inquire as to Dr. Lichtman's
Personal life.
not her personal life, but if she has any interest in stand-up comedy, and if so, who her favorites might be. And by the way, stand-up comedy in Spain is I think becoming a thing, as Carmen knows. Maybe you can watch some Spanish comedians, and that could.
But actually, American New York City comics here and The Cellar, no joke, they are so big in Spain. Like, I'll talk to people and they'll just like be like da da da, Mark Norman, Sam Morril. Like, it's just crazy how many some comics out there only watch American comics.
Interesting.
It's just a thing. Yeah.
Well, because comedy was born here, and so I think people perceive this English. It's like watching opera in Italian. It's considered, well, if you're going to watch opera, you got to watch it in Italian. Stand-up the English is considered sort of the language of stand-up.
Yeah, I honestly don't watch a lot of comedy, but I also don't watch a lot of TV or movies or anything. I just look at Facebook all the time because I don't like to like commit to a whole, show. So yeah, that's a waste of time. But do I have interest in stand-up comedy? I do. I don't have any like favorite particular people, but they had this program for people at my university where they could train professors in doing stand-up comedy. And so we had to like write and revise, I don't know, 5 minutes or something about our field of study. And so I did that, and I'm completely blanking on what the name of it was, but I assumed that you found me because I did this like stand-up comedy for professors thing.
No, not at all. I found you because I just stumbled on you. Because I Googled Camille Theobald. No, I was just I had a question in my mind about language acquisition,
About
age and language acquisition. And well, wouldn't you know it, Dr. Littman pops right up there. And
I have a question for you. Is it controversial at the university when like an example like Latinx, when they try to impose the order of one language on another, or say that a language is sexist because it has gender, and any thoughts related to that you can give us?
Yeah, I mean, it is controversial. Like most Latino people don't say Latinx. It's kind of a thing that like upper class woke people say. Was it actually controversial at universities? No, because they just embrace the whole woke thing. But yeah,
spoken like a woman with tenure.
What's that?
Spoken with slight contempt, like someone who has tenure. Like, I could, like, you can put it out there.
Tenure is actually terrible. We should get rid of tenure. Like, people don't use it to actually do something that's politically risky. Like, they just are so burned out by the time they get tenure that they just want to, sort of be dead wood and like maybe actually watch some TV and stop working 24/7. So yeah, and tenure creates no mobility. So like,
are you young to have tenure? You had mentioned, I won't mention your age, but you had mentioned it prior to the show.
Yeah.
Is that young, that age that you had told me, is that young for tenure?
It's not super young, no. So like, if you think about it, like say you graduate college at 21, a PhD would take like 5 years if you're really fast. So you could actually be 26 and get a job, and then you could be 32 and get tenure. So let's say 32 is like the youngest anyone pretty much gets tenure. The thing is, there's no tenure track jobs anymore. Like, universities just hire adjuncts because they're cheaper and you can fire them. So the entire ship of academia is slowly sinking. Like, jobs like mine, tenure jobs, are evaporating.
There's no tenure, of course, in the world of stand-up comedy, and I've been working here since the 90s, and I feel like I'm about to be shown the door.
Well, I think that this whole it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. But this loan forgiveness that they did, regardless of how you feel about it or whether you think it's legal and all that stuff, it shined a big spotlight on a question which wasn't being considered, which is college worth it? Is every major worth it? I mean, when you need a federal intervention to forgive loans for something that was considered to be a no-brainer investment in your future, and now it's being compared to a fraud. This is not going to go away overnight, and this is in some way has to change the whole landscape of higher education.
I predict a complete overturning of the whole system. And I do think people are going to stop going to college. I think people are going to do more learning online.
Yeah, I mean, I think they already are.
Yeah, it's already happening. I mean, there's so many ways, even for kids, like to get rich or become famous. I've been in places at shows where I'm like, what do you want to, they're like, what do you want to be? Or I ask them or whatever, we're talking about the future. And they're like, a YouTuber. And I'm like, what? Like,
okay, but not everybody can be a YouTuber.
But you can't pick if you're going to be an influencer, but that's just where they're going. They're like, I don't need to go to college. I can just be an influencer.
Well, whatever it is in the future, I think it will be fair to say now, listen, if you want to get a loan, you got to pick a major that we know is likely at least to be a good return on that investment.
Well, I actually train foreign language teachers, like to be foreign language teachers in the public school. And 100% of our graduates get jobs every year. This summer, it was like faster than ever. So, mostly it's Spanish teachers, but even when we have French and German teachers, they always get hired. So I do not have to worry about my graduates not getting that career.
Yeah. So they don't, and well, I mean, we've said it all, but there's something wrong with people. I mean, the example I saw was, but I don't mean it to be flippant. It's stuck in my mind. It's like gender studies. Like people are majoring in gender studies and they go into Hock for gender studies. And then they get out like, well, how do you get hired? Who's hiring people with gender studies degrees? It's, that has to stop. If you want that, pay your own way.
Yeah. I don't really think that majoring in gender studies is a thing that prepares you for any job other than just, having a BA.
Yeah. I mean, it's fine. It's to study it. Knowledge is, look, I'm a big believer. Knowledge is its own reward. Mm-hmm. And I only admire people no end who delve into something. But when you start borrowing money for it and then don't want to pay it back and you want it changes everything.
So yeah, that's another problem with tenure is like, let's say gender studies is really hot right now and you hire 3 professors and then in 20 years, no one wants to do gender studies. Well, you're still stuck with 3 professors. So you can't change and become modern because there's so many systems for.
As I was saying earlier, contrast that with the comedy cellar where they'll cut you right off at the knees.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not getting those laughs, I got to compete with these young people. Nicole, any thoughts on today's show?
Wait, I just want to say one thing for anybody who's interested in this tenure issue, and maybe you'd be interested in it, Professor. There's a riveting interview with Glenn Lowry and Amy Wax. Now, Amy Wax is this very controversial professor at University of Pennsylvania Law School, they're trying to fire her now, despite the fact she has tenure. And she said,
"That's the thing. Tenure doesn't really protect you, from getting canceled."
And I'm not going to go into it, but they're trying to fire her for some things, which she said, which you could see why they want to fire her. You could totally see why they want to fire her. On the other hand, her defenses of herself are pretty damn compelling. And I would recommend this podcast. It's really riveting. Glenn Lowry and Amy Wax this week. Anyway,
what's it called? The podcast?
I'm not sure what the name of his podcast. If you just Google Glenn, I'll send you the link.
Okay.
And Nicole, any thoughts on today's episode?
I thought it was really interesting. I've never once considered in my life dreaming in another language. So I thought that was cool that you all had like experiences with that.
Now, can you say that in German, please?
Definitely not. I know a little bit of Spanish, but not much.
As I said, Noam's dream is to have a bigger vocabulary. It seems like that's relatively easy and within your grasp.
What is your main way of doing that? Breeding or
it's not breeding?
Reading.
Oh,
I don't know where the B came from. Breeding.
No, well, I mean, despite everything that we're hearing here, I find that the older I get, the harder it is for me to learn new words. I do try, and I think what got me into it, I read now on the Kindle most of the time as opposed to books. And the Kindle gives you something which I wish I'd had when I was younger, that when you don't know a word, you can press the word and it gives you the definition. And it'll also keep track of every word that you've pressed. And it'll even give you like a flashcard type quiz where it'll test you on all the words that you haven't known.
That's
so
cool.
Yeah, it's fun. And, but it really has shined a light on the fact that there's a lot of words I don't know, a lot of words I thought I knew that I didn't really quite know. And it just really and then some people I know, like our friend Coleman, who's half my age, he just effortlessly uses not fancy words for the sake of being fancy, but exactly the right word. It's, it's more precise. It's narrow and exactly the meaning that he wanted, where I would fall back on somehow a more general term, which is right, but it's not.
Or you would use 2 words and you would get that precision.
No.
So where does he get that from? Upbringing, education? Where would
he's a
you?
genius.
Oh,
And he's and he's gone to Columbia and he likes it. He likes it. And I've noticed this just about life. A lot of the things that I'm interested in now and wish I knew more about now. I had zero interest in these things when I was college, like zero.
I know.
Well,
All I cared about was girls and the guitar. I don't know if it's full of hormones. I don't know what it was. I could not focus on things. I would just sit in college and I hated it. And I'd sit through like Soviet foreign policy, like meant nothing to me. And then at some point in about my 40s, I said, oh my God, this is all fascinating.
My
Well,
mother.
that's sort of the tragedy is that,
Yeah.
and it was me the same thing. I had no interest in learning a language until one day I started studying French, and I'm like, for some bizarre reason, I'm enjoying this, and I had no interest in it previously, and it's kind of a tragedy that it seems like college is wasted on the young, not
Youth is wasted. on
youth,
the young.
and
I hated
Green
college.
time.
I liked it socially. I hated academic.
I liked it neither. I had no social or academic.
I had only one happy year of academics. That was my first year in law school. For whatever reason, I enjoyed that. And then the second and third year were miserable.
Okay, Karen Lichtman, is there anything you'd like to plug? Do you have any books, keychains, bumper stickers?
Huh. Yeah, I do. I have a short little book. It's on TPRS, which stands for Teaching Proficiency Through Reading and Storytelling. So you guys were talking about, as an adult, can you just learn language effortlessly like kids do? And this is a teaching method. It's been around for a long time, since the 90s, that tries to create those situations of talking, just actually communicating using like really basic language and repetition. And yeah, it's a really, really great way to start out learning a language.
What's a really great way to start at the
Okay, so it's teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling. So I didn't come up with this. This is, been around since the 90s. In my book, just sort of, it's a short thing that for language teachers that tells them, how do people teach this way? And then also like why to teach.
So it's a book for language teachers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
By the way, the way they're teaching reading now is an abomination.
Without the phonics?
Yeah. What the hell?
What are they
doing? My son, the smart one, could not make heads or tails out of the way they were teaching him to read. They would give him the wrong answer because he didn't identify the picture as opposed to. And finally, I just sat him down and I taught him to read. And he's by far the best reader in his class. But I taught him the old-fashioned way.
Or not do phonics?
Say it again.
Did they do phonics with him?
No, they were not doing phonics.
Oh yeah, they got to do phonics. Phonics is good.
So this book is available. What's the name of the book?
Okay. I should really just put in the chat. It's like Teaching Proficiency Through Reading and
that's actually the name of the book. Okay.
That's
by Karen Lichtman.
And then there's a colon, and then it says an input-based method for language teaching or an input-based.
I have to say that our demographic. This is not exactly targeted marketing.
So
Sorry.
it's TPRS, right?
Yeah, TPRS.
This is not a book for the general public, is what I'm
just
getting.
Google TPRS Lichtman. You'll get
if you're interested in language teaching or language learning, it would be for you. Like I said, it's short.
I still say the best way to learn a foreign language, albeit not so easy, is to go to prison in a country where that language is spoken.
That is also a valid way.
Because where else are you going to get that kind of 24/7 immersion?
Get a girlfriend from a foreign country, Dan.
A girlfriend from a foreign you could do that. But first of all, it's not necessarily 24/7. Second of all, I have commitment issues. Although I guess I also have being in prison issues. And thirdly, women who speak, in my case, French would be the target language. They want to learn English. So it becomes a battle.
Say they don't shave their armpits.
It becomes a battle.
That too.
No, they do now. That's like a 60 series.
You have
There's no
to
further
find
application.
someone who does not want to learn English.
It's very hard to find, especially in New York City. If they're living in New York, and they get insulted if you speak to them in French. They're like, wait a minute, we're in America. Let's speak English. Very difficult. It becomes a battle.
Okay. We got to wrap
And
it up.
I will always give in first because that's my personality. Okay. Thank you, Karen Lichtman, professor of at Northern Illinois University, and buy her book, which the name escapes me.
TPRS, everybody.
Here you go. Just Google
Carmen Lynch, Vertically Obese,
Thank you.
is her special, and look her up online, and or go to her website, carmenlynch.com, to find out where she'll be playing near you. And do you have your Spanish dates on there as well?
Miami, September 8th.
In Spanish?
In Spanish.
A whole hour?
Yes.
Dios mío.
Adios.
Thank you, everybody. Adios.
Bye.